in between and ask um, and or send in the message, right? We'll be happy to answer. And yeah, let's make this a very interactive session. So it's not a sort of public talk, right? So we'll interact, stop me anytime, or if there's a doubt, or if you don't know how to set something up, or if you want to know about certain commands, just stop us and ask. So that's how you'll learn, right? Okay, so I'll just briefly start with, just a brief overview about what is GitHub and GitHub, and then we'll move on to more like hands-on. So I'll show you guys, how to use Git and GitHub, and also how to use it in a collaborative setting, because that's how you use it when you start working in industry and when you start working with a bunch of people, right? So you use in a collaborating mode. So me and Ashit, we are a team. So we'll show you, how we both can use GitHub at the same time and how we can track changes. Right? So yeah, so welcome to Data to Production. So Data to Production, so it started out as a podcast series. So me and Ashit, we started this Data to Production a few months ago for people who wanted to get into data science, data analyst, data engineering, and so on. So we have a bunch of podcasts that's been recorded and posted on YouTube, so you guys can go check it out. And also we'll be doing
I'll keep putting in the links in the chat, so feel free to check it out.
Yeah, and we'll be doing so, right? So keep an eye on LinkedIn. We'll be posting more and more. And again, the idea for that is also to show people, what is data science, what is data engineering, and how to get into it, and answer questions, right? So what are the basic things you need to know, and so on. And we also offer mentoring sessions, which I'll talk about at the end. So just a brief introduction to who we are. So Ashit, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. So hello everyone. My name is Ashit, and I'm a data scientist. I've been a data scientist from the past 2 years now, and although this is my first job, but I've been working on data science projects since almost about 4 to 5 years from back in college. So about my background, I did my civil engineering from IIT Bombay in 2021, and yeah, since then I've been a data scientist at Piramal Finance, and so I've been in the finance domain since 2 years till now. Yeah, thanks.
And yeah, connect with them on LinkedIn to keep following exciting things that he posts. So about me, so I come from a theoretical physics background. So graduated in 2019, and then I transitioned to data science, started out in healthcare. So worked in healthcare for some time, then moved on to academia. So again, I was back in academia as a data scientist, working on overnights, and now I work for the sports retailer, which is Decathlon. So Decathlon Canada, that's who I work for. Can connect with me on LinkedIn. So yeah, so let's get on to exciting stuff, right? So now this slide here just describes, the distinction between, so people get confused with, there's Git and then there's GitHub, right? So what is what? People get confused, and they both work hand in hand, right? So GitHub, let's start with GitHub, right? So GitHub is basically a service which is hosted on web, right? So if you just type GitHub on your computer, right? This is what I'm going to do here, right? So if you just type github.com, you end up to, this thing, you'd sign up, you would log in, and so on and so forth, right? So this is hosted on web, right? And you can store anything you like on GitHub, and you can do a lot more things, as you will see today, right? So that's GitHub, sorry. And then what is Git, right? So Git is basically an underlying technology which is underneath GitHub, and it's a command line service, right? So you can interact with GitHub using Git, right? So this is my terminal. So for people who are using Windows, I think it's called command prompt or something. So, right, if you open that up, if you have Git installed already, as soon as you type Git, right, so you get all of these commands and it tells you that Git is installed, right? So it's just a command line tool that lets you interact with GitHub, right? So it's a software. And again, it's basically installed locally on a computer, right? So Git is basically on my computer. What's the other distinction? Well, the other distinction is that GitHub basically lets you store your files. So it's it lets you store your files, your code, anything that you can think of, right? And because it's hosted on the web, it's hosted somewhere, let's say on the cloud or some designated server. So all your stuff exists until you delete them, right? So even if you delete them from your local computer, the stuff that you uploaded on GitHub will exist, right? So as an example here, right? So we have these two repositories, and again, I'll talk about what is repository. So we have these two repositories, right? I don't have these on my computer, right? I uploaded them long back. I don't have them on computer, but regardless of that, I can still see that it's there. So it's like a storage facility, if you like, right? So that's what GitHub allows you to do, right? And again, we picked this definition straight out of, I think, their website, right? And it's a basic definition. But the main thing to remember is, GitHub is a web service, which is hosted on the web, like the name mentions that, right? And Git is a tool. It's a software that you use to interact with GitHub. Okay? So that's the distinction between them two. So let's deep dive into Git, right? Because we're going to be doing a lot of things via terminal. So let's talk about Git, right? So Git is a version control system, right? So what do I mean by version control system, right? So by version control system, I mean it's basically it's like time machine, right? So you can go back in time and you can look at the changes that you have done, let's say a year ago, 2 years ago, and so on and so forth, right? So if you've been working on projects which you've been uploading to GitHub since, let's say, past 5 years, you can go all the way back to 5 years, and you can track your changes. What are the changes that you did back in time, right? So it's like a time machine. It basically assigns date and time to everything that you upload to GitHub, if that makes sense, right? So any file that upload gets a tag, right? So if I upload it right now, whatever the time is right now, whatever the date is right now, it gets tagged to that file that I'm uploading to GitHub. And it allows you to track changes, right? So for the same file, if I'm making a lot of changes, and if I want to know, okay, what are the changes that I made right just now, I can go look it up and I can track the changes. What are the changes that I made 20 minutes ago? I can go look it up and I can compare them, right? The changes that I just made versus the changes that I made 20 minutes ago, I can go look at them, I can compare them, right? So that's what it allows you to do, right? Track changes in the code over time. So the main idea behind, I mentioned repository earlier, right? So let's talk about that. So what is a repository, right? So in GitHub terminology, a repository basically is nothing but a folder, right? So on your computer, you create folders, right? And you upload files and everything in that folder. In GitHub terminology, a repository is nothing but just a project folder, right? And in that folder, you upload things. Simple as that, right? Now, there is a one single central repository or central folder, which is on GitHub. And this single repository or folder is what you as a team, if you're working as part of a team, let's say, would interact with, right? So it's a single place where everyone basically communicates on, right? So at the end of the day, people are working on many different things, right? At the end of the day, you have a single repository which, let's say, goes into production, and that's where people need to upload things, right? So as an example, right, let's say we have a folder on GitHub, right? And me and Ashit, we are developers, we are working on this project, right? And we have our own code, he's working on his thing, I'm working on my stuff, right? And at the end of the day, we need a single, storage where we would be uploading all of these things. So he can see the stuff as well, the things that I've worked on, and I can see the stuff that he's worked on. And we can basically keep track of, what is it that we both are working on, right? So imagine, if you're building a website, he's working on front-end stuff, I'm working on back-end stuff, and so on, right? So that single place or single storage where we would end up uploading is, it's basically called a central repository, right? And sometimes you see, yeah.
If I can summarize what exactly is Git and how do you act, so why is it used? Why does everyone use it, right? So just if, for example, let's say you are working on a data science project, and when you work in a company, you probably multiple people work on the same project. It is rarely the case that you alone are working on a project, right? So how do you track what each of you are doing, right? So that's where Git comes into play. So for example, you are developing a certain feature, your teammate is developing another feature. So how do you basically merge those features together into a single code? That's where Git comes in. And so, for example, let's say one primitive way to do this can be like you have your code, then you make some changes in it, then you mail that code to another person. He makes some changes in it, then he mails it back to you. But by then you have already made some other changes in your own code. Then what you have to do is you have to see like what are the two files, how are the two files different, and you have to carefully merge them together so that it can work in a single code. So that's what Git allows you to do in a simple way. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's a really good example, right, of email, right? And again, emails, right? You rather than sending back and forth, a bunch of emails, imagine sending back and forth 30 times a day, right? It's a lot of hassle. And in between, you would miss some emails, then you'd be like, okay, what happened, right? So yeah, that's a good example of why Git is important, right? So a few more terminologies for GitHub, right? So I've mentioned one, which is a repository. It's nothing but a folder. Sometimes you would see a thing called remote. So remote basically means that it's on GitHub. That's all it means, right? So it's a remote repository. So it's hosted somewhere on the cloud. So whenever you hear a word remote, it just means that it's hosted on GitHub, and GitHub is hosted on cloud somewhere. Sometimes you'll also see this word called origin. So origin is nothing but, so when you create a repository on your GitHub, you get a URL, right? So that URL, the shortcut name, a short form name for that URL is the origin. So you can set a short form name for that URL as origin. That's all it means. Okay, so you will hear these words very often. Okay, so up until now, hopefully everything's clear. If you have any questions, stop me and you can ask. Okay, so let me move on to. So there are a lot of terminologies, right? And you will see what each of these mean and how to use them, right?
Mithul,
So
can you go full screen? Can you start the slideshow?
There you go.
Yeah, better.
Okay, all good. Okay. So yeah, so there are a lot of commands and terminologies you will come across in GitHub. Some of them you will see today. Actually, all of these ones you will see them today. So yeah, we'll get there, what it means and how to use them, how to implement them, or how to run them, right? So how does Git work, right? So let's start from there, right? So imagine me, I'm working on a computer, right? I'm building stuff, some backend stuff or something, right? And this is my computer screen. This is what you can see. right? So I have a folder on my computer, right? Let's call that backend. I name that folder as backend, right? So for the first thing is what we do is we start with a working directory, right? And inside this working directory, we create many different files and so on and so forth, right? So that's where I am. I create all my all my files and everything, right? Now I want to push this up to my remote repository, right? So there are a number of steps that you have to take before it gets to the remote repository, right? So how does it work? Well, the first thing you have to do is there's something called staging area. Okay, so staging area is where you're putting your things which are ready to be pushed to GitHub, right? So you start from your working directory, you modify your changes and so on and so forth, right? And then you run this command called git add. And what git add does is it takes the files which you have in your working directory. Now you can specify which files you wanted to put into the staging area, right? So once you do git add, it takes it and it puts it into the staging area. And staging area is nothing but, it's just saying that, hey, these files are ready, right? And these files are ready to be pushed over to GitHub. That's all it means, right? I've modified these files and it's like, a checkoff box, for instance, right? So these files are done, it's good to go, and I've checked them out, I put it into the staging area, that's it. And then there's a thing called git commit. And what git commit does is, we talked about a remote repository. Now let's talk about our local repository, right? So local repository is nothing but a copy of your remote repository, or vice versa. You can think of it as a copy of, you can think of remote repository as a copy of your local repository, or you can think of local repository as a copy of your remote repository. Okay. So local repository and remote repository, they both have to be in sync with each other, right? So once you have done the changes, you do git commit. And what that does is it creates a snapshot, right? So it tags the date and time with all the changes you have done, and it just creates a snapshot in time, right? And it just stores them in a local repository. Now, once you have things in your local repository, then you can push it over to your, once you have things in your local repository, you can push it over to your remote repository by doing git push. Right? And again, there are a few more things in addition to these commands. I'll show you in an example, but these are the commands to remember, right? So git add takes from working directory to the staging area. It is a checkbox, right? And then git commit takes it from there to the local repository. It creates a snapshot of all your changes. And then git push takes from local repository to your remote repository. Simple as that. Okay. Now, let's say, Ashit's been working on his project, right? And he did the same thing. He pushed everything over to remote repository, right? Now, my repository, my local repository is different than remote repository, right? Because locally, I only have things that I've been working on. I don't have things that Ashit has been working on. So how can I, grab those changes that Ashit has pushed to the remote repository? I can just do git pull. Right? So once I do git pull, now I have all the changes that I've done on the backend side. And I also have all the changes that Ashit's been working on the front end side. So I have everything, single thing, let's say to run the website. Now I can run it locally, right? So simple as that. These commands, like for me, for instance, I use this every single day. I probably run them, 100 times a day. So these are the commands to remember. So you can memorize them, and over time, if you keep using them, you'll get used to it. Any questions up until this point, or anything you want to mention, Ashit?
So basically, the remote repository is the central, let's say, the central store of all your codes. Now, multiple people in your team can have the copy of this central store on their local machines, their local laptops. Now, let's say one of your teammates does some changes and then pushes to the central store. Now, the central store has been changed, but the other teammates don't have those changes yet. So to get those changes, they have to pull it from the remote again to be updated. That's the whole thing that Mithul just explained.
Okay. And the other question that I often get asked is, what can we put on GitHub? Oh, sorry. Yeah, what can we put on GitHub? Right? What are the kind of things that one should be storing on GitHub and one shouldn't be storing on GitHub? Right. So is the local repo temporary? Local repo, it's not temporary. I mean, so if it's an ongoing project, let's say, then local repo can be deleted anytime, right? If you no longer need it, if you no longer need to, work on that project, if you need to free up some space from your computer, once you're done with your entire project, once you have uploaded everything to GitHub, you no longer need it. You can delete it. But let's say if it's something that you're continuing to work on, you're going to come back to it tomorrow and you're trying to run things, then obviously you need to have that local repo, right? So local repo is nothing but so when you create a folder, right? So when you create a new folder on your local computer, and then when you do git init, it creates a local repository, right? Again, I'll show you what I mean by that. So there's a hidden file called .git. Okay, so when you delete that .git file, it deletes the local repository. You still have your folder, but as soon as you delete that .git file, you no longer have local repository. Simple as that.
So basically, if you, Akash, so if you mean that the local repository is temporary, as in it automatically gets deleted, then no, it stays with you until you delete it.
Yeah, right. So as an example, here for, so I'm just gonna go to one of my students. So Fatima, who's in the talk right now. So I'm gonna go to her project, right? So here, if I just do this, you can see, actually I need to go into project data. So you can see this .git, right? So this .git basically means that you have a local repository, and every single snapshot, that every single commit that you did, everything is stored in here, right? So as soon as you delete this .git, you no longer have local repository. So simple as that. Now, in terms of project, all I did was I created this project data folder, and basically I have all my files and everything in there. They're still there. They're not gonna vanish. All that's gonna vanish is this local repository. That's it. You're not losing anything else. But yeah, again, if you come back to doing the project and integrating with GitHub and so on, you need this, right? And then once you're done with your project, like I said, right, if you want to free up some space on your computer, you no longer need this project, you can safely delete it because everything is on GitHub. So you don't have to worry about losing anything.
We have another question. When multiple people are working on the same code, does the remote get updated incrementally after everyone pushes their code?
Yes, and you will see that today. So it does get updated incrementally as we push the code. And it is, again, GitHub stores every single thing. And again, you'll see that when we start working today. Do we need to always git pull before pushing to Git? That's a really good point. And yes, so there are multiple things to take into account to answer this question. So one of them is depends on, so we'll talk about branches. So there's a concept about branches, right? So we will get there. Now, if you're working on different branches and if you're working as part of a team, right? And let's imagine this, okay? So there's a single branch, okay? So me and Ashita are working on that single branch, right? So I'm pushing my changes to GitHub, right? And then let's say Ashit is pushing his changes to GitHub as well, right? Now that branch has been updating over time, right? But my local repository and Ashit's local repository, it's not updating, right? It's only getting updated with the things that we are doing locally. That's it, right? So in order to, at the end of the day, in order to merge everything together to build as a whole product, yeah, we need to do git pull, right? So sometimes if you're working on the same file, let's say me and Ashita are working on the same file, and if you are making the changes on the same file, we both, if we don't do git pull, then we both are not aware of the changes that we're making to the same file. So
it
yes,
won't even let you push without pulling
yeah.
then.
So GitHub is really careful in terms of, and it's really good in terms of, not allowing you to move on to the next step until you resolve everything. And yeah, and when you work as part of a team, when you're working on branches, there's always this single branch that people push, merge everything to, which is called, let's say, a master branch or main branch. Right. So every single day when you come back to work, you should make sure that you git pull from your master branch, because that time, there are 10 different people who are working on your project. There are chances that every single day, these 10 people are working on new features and they're pushing into production. So for those changes to get reflected on your local repository, you should make sure that you git pull. Again, we'll talk about that. So if it's not clear right now, it will be clear afterwards. Okay, so let me go back to this slide here. What time is it? Okay, so we need to move on. So here are the few things that you shouldn't be doing when you go and work in an organization, right? Right now, if you're working on your small projects and so on, it's okay because the data sets are not sensitive, so it's okay to push it. But when you go and work in organizations, these are some of the things that you shouldn't be doing. Okay, so one of them is data sets. So GitHub is not a place to store data sets, right? So GitHub keeps track of code over time, right? It keeps track of the changes that you do to the code over time, but it doesn't keep track of data versioning, right? So there's no time attached to data, so you cannot know the differences between last week's data and this week's data. And also the data sets can be sensitive, and GitHub, there are so many people who use GitHub, and hackers can easily access to your data sets. So you should never push sensitive data sets to GitHub. Use a data versioning tools, just like GitHub, it's a code versioning tool, right? Or file versioning tool, right? So similarly, you can go and find some other tools that allows you to version data sets. That's one thing. Do not push your password secrets. Do not store them on GitHub. Like I said, again, it's easy to to hack. For example, let's say AWS, right? If you accidentally push AWS credentials to GitHub, make sure that you go and delete it right away and create a new ones. And even if you go delete the file, so let's say accidentally you pushed your credentials to GitHub and then you realize it and you go and delete it, there's no point, because GitHub is a timeline, right? It's a time machine. So you can go back in time and you can check the credentials. Now there is a way to delete it for good from GitHub, but usually it's not a good idea to do so. So if you go onto GitHub websites and you will see the best practices, they'll tell you like it's not a good idea. So right away go and change it to your credentials and everything. That's the best way to deal with it. The other thing is, do not push notebooks. So Jupyter notebooks, so for people who are with Python, Jupyter notebooks, and so on, do not push your Jupyter notebooks to GitHub. And again, this is because when it comes to code reviews and so on and so forth, it's not really it messes up the entire output. So you cannot really see the differences between the changes you have done. And in GitHub, there's a command. Sometimes, you run into some issues and Git will tell you to use this command, --force flag. Do not use that, because what that does is basically it wipes out your entire commit, the snapshots that you have done. It basically overwrites or wipes out your entire history. So, the whole point of Git and GitHub is to store history of your project, right? And if you use this command, if you misuse this command, let's put it that way, then there are chances that you're going to wipe out the entire history. So no, do not use that. Work on branches, right? And again, I'll talk about branches. So work on branches. So, when you're working as part of a team, and even if you're working by yourself, make sure to work on branches and, push it, create small PRs. And each branch work on a single thing, work on a single project, right? Push it to GitHub, create a PR, merge it into production. Then go out and start working on a second feature, create a new branch, again, repeat the whole process. So what happens is when you work on small iterations, your code goes into production right away. You don't have to wait for months until you see things in production. Does branch means a new change? Branch, so branch doesn't mean a new change. So what branch means is, I think it's better. Okay, I'll keep that question for now. I'll get back to it when we talk about branches. And yeah, do small commits, right? So whenever you're making changes to the files, don't wait until you make hundreds or 200 lines of changes, then push it to GitHub. Don't do that. Make small changes, push it to GitHub, and write a clear message, right? So when you create a snap, when you do git commit, right, that's where it's creating a snapshot, right? And the messages that you write there, make sure you write a valuable message and very informative message, so that you can go and keep track of it, right? What are the changes you did at this point in time? Then whatever the message is, it should be able to tell you what are the changes that you have done. And it doesn't have to be really long sentences, right? A nice, concise, small message is good enough. Branches. So let's talk about branches. Okay. So yeah, there's a whole concept about branches. And it's really useful when you work as part of a big team. And also to push things into production, to not break things, and so on and so forth, right? So imagine this. Okay, so whenever you create your first repository, it comes with a default branch, right? So which is basically a main or a master branch. You can name them whatever you like, but the standard is to name them as main or master. Okay, and that's this branch here, right? And these blobs here, you can think of them as the code changes that goes into production. Okay, all of these are basically the things that went into production, right? Now, me and Ashit, right? So we are developers. We want to work on some new features, right? So what I do is, so here's is the last thing that went into production, right? So imagine this is a timeline. Okay, so this x-axis is the timeline, right? So I come here and I create my own branch, right? So I come here. There's actually a pencil. The pencil vanished. Okay, I come here and I make my own branch here, right? So how do I make my branch? There's a command in GitHub. It's called git checkout -b, and then I can name whatever branch name I like. Here I'm calling it dev1. So I create my own branch, right? So now my my path is different than the production line, right? Now I continue to work on my thing. All of these things are the stuff that I'm working on, right? And then at the end of the day, I'm done with my work, and let's say I want to push this into production, right? So what can I do? Well, I can just push it to the main branch here, which is a single branch where everyone pushes to, and which goes into production. Okay? So I can just do git push origin, and then I can push it to the branch. I can pass in the name of my branch here. And again, remember this, right? Origin is nothing but a GitHub repositories URL. So it's just a short form name. Instead of origin, you can paste in your entire URL, or you can create a short form name for it, right? So here, then origin is basically the GitHub repositories URL, and then I can pass in the branch name. Now, as soon as I've done that, then I can go ahead and merge that, right? Now, I'll merge these changes into the main production line. Now, Ashit at this point here starts working on his stuff, right? And he does the same thing, git checkout -b dev2, right? Now he's going to merge at this point in time. But you see here, this thing here is now different than the stuff that he had, because I merged my changes here, to the production line. So his local repository is not in sync anymore with the remote repositories. So what he needs to do here is he needs to git pull. So git pull origin main. So what happens is whatever the changes that are pushed to the main branch, he gets it on his local repository, right? And then he can continue to work on his thing and so on and so forth. And then he can go ahead and push the changes and merge it with the production. So this is how branches work. So does branch means a new change? Well, a branch means basically that you're trying to work on new features, or you're trying to, so basically you're making new changes to the code, to the production code.
So so Akash, just to answer your question, so what does a branch mean? So let's take an example that there is some code. Let's say you are writing a Python code, and now you want to add, maybe you want to just add a function in that code file. Now you have two choices. So either you can just stay on the same main branch and do those changes there and push it back there. But there's a risk there that maybe one of your teammates might be doing the same thing, and his changes might be incompatible to your changes, right? So this risk is always there. So that's why it is always advisable to work on separate branches. So what do you do is you check out the main branch, and just let's say you must have seen, let's say there's a river, there's a main river, and it branches out into a tributary, and later it can join back to the same river, right? So that's just take that as a branch, if that answers your question.
Yeah. And you shouldn't, yeah. The other reason is, you should never work on the main branches, because when you're working on new things, when you're trying to work on new features and stuff, what happens is, remember, when you deploy your code, right, your code gets deployed from the main branch, right? So if you directly push your stuff to the main branch, the chances are you're not allowing anyone else to do code review, right? So you're the solely person who worked on the code. Now there can be bugs in the code, right? So you need another eye, you need another eye to catch those bugs, or to simplify things, or to optimize your code, and so on and so forth, right? But if you just directly push it into the main branch, chances are your bugs are going into production, and it's going to break things in production, right? So it's always a good idea to go and work on your own branches, and then create something called PR, which is pull request. And a pull request is nothing but you're allowing other collaborators, you're asking other collaborators to look at your code and to see if everything is fine. If there are bugs, or if there's something that can be simplified, the collaborators will then, give you suggestions, and then you can make those changes and so on, right? So you can catch those bugs and everything. Then you merge into production, right?
So if you can see the image that I just sent, you can see there's a main river, and you can see it sometimes branches out to different parts, and then those parts join back on the same river. So that's how you can think about it.
Your question is there a review of? Yes. So there is a review of your code. Yeah. That's the whole purpose of the branches, right? So here, for example, in this example here, right? So when I'm done with my work here, so I'm going to create something called PR, which is pull request. And I'm going to add Ashit as a collaborator, as a reviewer, sorry, right? So when I add Ashit as a reviewer, Ashit is going to look at my code. He's going to, go through my code and everything. And if there are bugs, or if there's anything, he will tell me, right? And then I can make those changes and everything. And then once he approves my work, until he approves my work, I cannot merge, right? So once he approves my work, then I can go ahead and merge it. So yes, there is a review of your code from your branch. Hopefully that answered your question. And again, we'll demonstrate this. So let's get on to practical session. So we'll just demonstrate. Another thing actually before we move on is creating a repository, right? So now there are two ways that you can do. So you can go onto the GitHub repository and you can create a repository from there. Now in your own, actually, yeah, we'll just demonstrate. Actually, it's better to demonstrate than talk about it. So let's take this question here. So if I git pull again, after some new changes have been added to main branch, will my changes stay with the newly imported changes from the main branch, or just the code from the main branch which will stay? Okay, so on your main branch, so let's say you and me, we both are working on that branch, right? So let's say I pushed all the changes to the main branch. Now you've been continuing to work on your stuff on the main branch, but I've pushed the changes to the main branch, right? But those changes, you don't have them on your computer, on your local repository, right? So all the stuff that you've been working on, right, that is in your local repository. Now, when you do git pull, the changes that I have pushed to the main branch, you will get them along with the changes that you've been doing. You will have those as well as the changes that I've done, right? Now, if let's say, for example, we both have been working on the same file, right? Same part of the code. Then what happens is, I want to take an example. Okay, let me take an example, right? So I'm just going to create, okay.
I think you'll have to increase the font size in this terminal.
How did I do this? I don't remember. Okay, Francis. I think it's in advance. No. Okay, I'm gonna check it out. I don't know how to do this. Oh, there you go, text. Okay, let me do that 20. Is that good enough?
Yeah.
Is it good? Okay. So let's take an example, right? So let's say we both have been working on this README file. Okay. Now the changes that I've pushed to GitHub, I've just added this line called project data. Okay. Now you've been working on your local repository, and let's say instead of project data, your one differs. Your one says that project backend instead of project data. Okay. So when you do git pull, Git will tell you like, hey, your changes are different than the changes from the other person who just pushed to GitHub. And Git will be like, Git allows you to control it, right? So Git tells you like, hey, what are the changes you want to keep? Do you want to keep the one that the other person has pushed? Or do you want to keep the one that, the one that you have? So it's called a conflict, right? And then you can decide which one you want to keep, right? Whichever one you want to keep, you can keep it and then continue working on it. That's it. Simple as that. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay. Yeah, so Git is really good about that, right? It won't let you push your changes and everything until you resolve that conflict. And it's really simple, right? So you just open that file in your text editor, and then Git will show you like, hey, this comes from the other person. The bottom one says that this is yours. And all you have to do is, just, select those lines, whichever you want to get rid of, and just delete, and then you're good to go. What if you want to keep both changes? Okay, so if you want to keep both changes, so for example, let's say you have project data, but you also have project backend. I mean, you cannot have both changes unless you have multiple changes. Let's say you have a whole sentence, and in that sentence, there are multiple places where you're making changes, right? Then you can decide, but I don't see how you can keep project data at the same time you can keep project backend. I don't see that happening. So yeah, so you have to select either of it. But if it's an entire sentence and there are multiple places that you have made the changes and you want to keep both changes, then it can be done. Yeah. So So here you can imagine there's another line. Now on the new line, I have made some changes, and you have made some changes on the same line. Now Git will be like, there's a conflict, and you'll be like, okay, I want to keep these changes, but also I want to keep the changes that was on the new line. You can do it. That's doable. Okay. Okay, so let's move on to practical session actually, if everything is clear. So yeah, so me and Ashit will just demonstrate how we do things, and we'll show you the commands, right? So the repo that we're going to be working on, so we already have a GitHub account. Oh, too many things. Where am I? There. Yeah, so we already have a GitHub account. Hopefully you guys have it because we're not going to demonstrate how to create a GitHub account. That's going to be a lot of time. So we already have a GitHub account, and we are just going to basically create a repository and show you all the commands. So Ashit, over to you. You'll have to create the repo. Yeah. Actually, before we move on, I do want to mention one thing. So we've been working on making a documentation. So we do, like, we offer mentoring, like I mentioned before, right? And to help our students put together this documentation, which helps you, with setting up everything and explaining things in detail about, about your repository, branches, pull requests, so on and so forth. Now I've decided to, release it to public so anyone can use it. So if you need help with, setting up your GitHub and everything for the first time, now I know there are a lot of things on the internet, but, if you want to, cut down the chase and, just get directly to the point, feel free to use this. We'll put it in the chat. If you're setting up your GitHub for the first time, if you want to know about branches and so on, yeah, you can just use it. So yeah, we'll just put this in the chat for people if you want to check it out. And I'm still updating it. A lot of things will be updated here. So, but yeah, it's part of the mentoring sessions that we do for data science. So, okay, over to you, Ashit.
So I'll start sharing my screen.
I'm going to stop mine.
Okay, is it visible?
Yeah.
So this is our GitHub account, and to create a new repository, you just go to the homepage of your account, select new, and just enter the repository name. Let's take it Git masterclass. We want it public. We can choose to add a README file, or we can add it manually later. Create repository. So now it has been created on the remote server. Now what we can do is we can clone it on our local repository. So first I'll just add Mithul as a collaborator. So you just go to settings, collaborators, add people.
This is Mithul DS. There you go. Okay, so what happens now is basically I get an invitation on my email, and I can just open the invitation and just accept the invitation. Simple as that.
So I think now, Mithul, you can share your screen back again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to clone that first, or?
Yeah. Okay. Let me just clone it for you guys. So let's say I want this remote repo in my local laptop. So what I do is I just open git bash in whatever folder I want it cloned. And what I do is git clone. This is a simple command, git clone, and then the URL of your repo. So basically, this is the URL. You just paste it here, git clone, and then the URL. So it will clone it. So it says that you appear to have cloned an empty repository, which is completely okay because it is an empty repository. And in this folder that you have cloned it, you will see this folder with the name of your repo. The name was git-masterclass. Inside it, you see your .git folder. This signifies that this is actually a Git repository. Otherwise, it is empty.
So Ashit, while you're there, you can just show how to add the README file and how to push it to GitHub. and then I can get my side. Yeah.
Yeah. So either you can do it via this command line only. So if you are familiar with Vim or any other editor, you can choose to do it through that. But let's do it via like normal how Windows people do it. So just what you want to do is you just create a new file. You rename it readme.txt. You just open it. And then you just describe the repo. This is the repo for Git masterclass. That's it. You just save this file.
I should
Then what
change
you
that.
do is
Change that to .md, so it's visible on GitHub.
So just change the extension. Now what we can do is let's just push it then. So what you want to do is now if you want this README file to appear on your remote repository, first you add this file to the staging area, then you commit it, then you push it. So the way to add it to the staging area is as we showed it on the first slide, I guess, is git add, then the file name. Wait, I have to go inside that folder first. Then let's do git add readme.md. As soon as you do it, it goes into the staging area, which you can check in git status. So here you can see no commits yet, changes to be committed, new file readme.md. Now we can commit it, git commit -m lets you give a message for the commit. So adding readme file. This file has now been committed. We can again check the git status. Now you can see that nothing to commit. So there are no other changes to commit now. Now you can directly push it. So you can do git push directly. And what happened?
So you'll have to, I think, add a remote.
Okay, wait. I'll have to add myself as a collaborator as well.
Oh yeah, it's on the different one, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got added, I think.
Yeah. Now I can actually push it because now I have the access. So let's do git push again. Now you can see counting objects, writing objects, main to main. So basically by this new branch, this was in the local repo. So from the local main to the remote main. So now if we go and see in the actual repo, this was the actual repo. I'll just refresh it. Now you can actually see a readme.md file here. And because it is the MD extension, it actually shows here. And this is the content of the file.
Yeah. Okay, so can do on my side now. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't have the file right on my side. So I don't have the file. So what I'm going to do is just like what Ashit did, I'm just going to git clone it, right? And I can see right away the changes that he's done, right? So I can do that with any repository. And someone mentioned earlier, right? Can we delete this local repository? Yes, you can. So if you delete it, and then if you need the project again, all you can do is go back there again, and then I can just do git clone here, and I can just paste it, and then I'll just get it here, right? So I can see git masterclass, so I can just go inside of it, right? And I can see the README that I should add it, right? So I can see what's in my README, and I can say this is the repo for git masterclass, which is what I have on GitHub, right? Now, yeah, so some commands that I should show you, right? So one of them is called git status. So git status allows you to see basically if you have done any changes to your files or not, right? So that's what it allows you to show you, and allows you to do, right? And also it also allows you to do is basically it shows you where. So I've showed you the pipeline, right? From working directory to staging to local repo to remote repo. Yeah. So there are 4 things in the pipeline, right? So git status allows you to check where you are in these 4 steps, right? So now I'm going to make changes, let's say, to this repo, right? So what I'm going to do is I'll just open this file, and I'll just say taught by Mithul and Ashit, let's say. Created that Ashit, let's say, and I just save it, right? Now I can see the new changes here. Now I can do git status, right? So as soon as I do git status, it says the color is different than what I should show you earlier, right? So right now it's not been added to the staging area. That's why it's red. And so Git is really nice. Git tells you exactly what are the next steps. So here it tells you like, hey, if you want to add it, if you want this to be committed, you can just do git add and the file name, right? So let's do that, right? And the other thing I can do is this. There's a command called git diff. So what git diff does is basically shows you the differences between the changes that I've made and the changes that was done by previous person, right? So I can see here. So as soon as I type git diff and the file name, this is what I get, right? So here, these basically means that these lines are removed, right? And then these means basically these lines are added. And sometimes you would see these lines as well. So for example, I think in mine, because I've done something, it shows me both lines. So here I can see the lines that's been added by me, right? And then this one here tells you how many lines were added, how many lines were removed, where they were added, so on and so forth, right? So that's what that allows you to do. Now I can go ahead and do git add readme, all right? And again, I can do git status, and now it's a different color because now it's in the staging area. Right now I can do the next step, which is git commit -m updated readme. Now this is very important, right? This is what I was talking about. Make sure the things that you write here, it's informative, and you will see why, right? You will see why. I will show you why. So as soon as I do that, now it tells me like 1 file change, 2 insertions, 1 deletion, right? And then I can just do git push origin. Now I like typing in the whole thing, right? So I'm going to do git push origin. So when it comes to branches, instead of just doing git push, you should type the whole thing where you want to push, right? So git push origin. What is origin? Origin is nothing but my URL, my repository URL, right? So this URL here, that's my origin. I'm just giving a short form name called origin. Git automatically does it for you, right? So git push origin, and I can just type in, I think it's called main. So I can just type in main, and then I can push it. Simple as that. Now, if I go here, if I refresh it, and you can see it's been updated, right? Now, let me talk about this commits. So this is your repository, and there are a lot of things here to explore. One of them is branch. So your branches will show up here. So right now we only have one branch, which is called main. And you can see, keep track of how many branches you have here, right? Now, the other thing is there's a time, right? It shows you when was the recent push. And this thing's called commit. And this is the timeline that I was talking about, right? So you can see 8 minutes ago, I should this commit. 1 minute ago, I did
Can
this.
you zoom in on this screen?
Is it good?
Yeah.
So 8 minutes ago, I should did this commit. 1 minute ago, I did this, right? Now I can go and I can actually check what is it that I should did. I can check what is it that I did. And the other thing I can do is, let's say there were 100 different files on my repo, right? And I want to check out how my repo looked like at this point in time, right? So what I can do is I can come here and I can basically view the repository at that point in time. So see, now this is what it looked like when Ashit puts his changes for the first time, right? And then I can come back to the latest one. This is what the latest one looks like, right? So yeah, that's a basic on git add, git commit, git push, okay? And the other thing that can be done is, so Ashit, I'm gonna push some changes. Actually, wait, you can push some changes. I'll just show git pull command.
Okay, so I'm just doing some random changes in the readme file.
Yeah, and then refresh it when you're done.
You can answer this question in the meanwhile.
What's the question? What was git dev? So git dev basically shows you the changes that you have done to your file. So when you modify your file, right? And let's say it's the same file, right, that you modified. So when you do git dev it basically do I still have it here? Let me see. The output. No, I don't have it. Yeah, no, I don't have it. So what git diff allows you to do is it takes in two files that's been modified, right? So you have one file that was modified by the other person and which was on the git repo. Now you took that file, you added in some of your stuff as well. So when you do git diff will show you like, hey, these were the changes that was from the remote repository. And then it will show you the changes that you have added to that file. That's all it does. Okay, it just shows you it basically compares the two files and shows you the differences between those two files. Simple as that. And again, I'll show you again when we make changes.
So yeah, I made the changes.
Okay, so I'm just gonna refresh this page and I can see I should just added some more changes here. So now I can demonstrate git pull, right? So now those changes, I don't have it on my computer, right? If I do readme, you can see I don't have those changes, right? These changes on my computer. Now what I can do is I can do git pull origin main. And see, now Git tells me that, hey, one file changed, one insertion, right? And it tells me like, okay, there is an additional thing that's been added to this file. Now let me see if git diff works here. No, it won't work. Yeah, because I haven't modified anything. Yeah, because I haven't modified anything, right? Now I can see those changes on my local repo, right? So that's how git pull works, right? And because Ashit didn't make any changes to already existing ones, and because I wasn't working on that part as well, because I already pushed my code, there wasn't a conflict, right? Because he added a new line and also I pushed my stuff before he did. So there wasn't a conflict between us two working on the same part of the code, right? Okay, let me talk. Hopefully that's clear so far. So git add, git commit, git push, git pull, 4 commands so far. Now let's look at branches, right? How do we create branches?
So let's just ask like the people like, are you guys okay if we extend this by, let's say, maybe 20 minutes more? Because I think we are out of time and we have like branches left to cover. Does anyone have any problem with it?
Okay. Looks like
Sure.
everyone's okay.
Let's go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so we'll do the branches and PR and then we'll wrap it up. So I'll try to be quick. Okay, so let's do with branches. Okay. So right now, if I do git branch, I see that I only have one branch, which is called main, right? And I can see a star next to it. So so by using that star, I can tell which branch I'm on. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to create a new branch called. So how do you create a new branch? It's simple as git checkout -b. So what this does is basically it creates a new branch and it automatically switches to that new branch. Okay. So I'm going to create a branch called Mithil and see it automatically switch to a new branch. Now, if I do git branch again to see which branch I'm on, and you can see that that star moved under my name, right? And I mean, you're seeing a different color because my terminal, I've updated it with a lot of things. That's why you see it, but don't expect to see different colors. But yeah, this is how you can tell that you're on a different branch. Okay, so now I'm gonna make some changes. Okay, so I'm gonna add, let's say, I'm gonna create a new file, file 01.txt. This file is created by Mithil. Okay, I'm gonna just save them. That's it, simple as that. And then I'm gonna check the status, right? Someone mentioned git dev. What does it do? So let me see if it allows me to. Yeah, it won't allow me. Okay, now I can just add that file. So previously you are working on main, which ideally should not be done. Yeah, you're right. So the main branch, yeah, you shouldn't do that. You should always create a new branch and work on it. Yep. So that was just for the demonstration purpose, but yes, you got it. So now I'm going to go ahead and add this file and I'm going to commit a new file added with some content. Okay. And then there you go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to push. Now here's where things change, right? So now I don't need to push to the main, right? So if I just type git push, let's see what I think it's going to accidentally push to the main. And if I run this command, it's actually going to go and do it. Why? Because my branches are not protected. So there's something else we need to do on repository so that these commands, when we run them, Git will complain that, hey, you cannot do that. You're not allowed to do that. So we have to set some rules, but right now we haven't done so. So I'm going to type in, I'm not going to run this command, otherwise it will push it to the main. So again, just type git push origin. Again, what is origin? Origin is nothing but my remote repository. And what is my branch name? I can see my branch name here, right? So I can just type in Mithil and then there you go, right? So I can come back here, I can refresh it. And now you see, I have two branches and see git here tells me that your branches are not protected. So if I just run git push, it would push here to the main branch. So you can protect this branch. Again, we're not going to do this right now. And here I can see I have my branch. So I can click on it. And then here I can see I have a file 01 text. Simple as that, right? And what is the next step? Well, the next step is so Ashit can work on his branch. So Ashit, you're gonna go ahead and create a branch and then create a 02.
Yeah.
File.
So do you want me to share my screen or should I do it in the background?
You can do it. I think you don't need to share. So it's the same process, basically. Yeah, and you can create 02.text. And then when you're done, you can let me know. Syntax is same for Windows and Mac.
Yeah. Git syntax is the same.
So then you have to run it in git bash, right, on Windows.
Yeah.
So you need to think on Windows. Again, I'm not a Windows user, so I don't know much about Windows because I don't use them. been a long time. But I think on Windows, you need to install, please make a conflict and resolve it. Okay, we'll do conflict as a next step. And actually, let's do did you already push it?
Yeah.
Ashit? Okay. Yeah, we'll do conflict as our next step. Okay, so you can see there's 3 branches now. Ashit just created a new branch called file02.txt, right? Now, let's say at this point in time, I'm happy with my stuff. Now I want to go ahead and push this, basically merge it to the main branch, right? So how can I do that? Well, I can come back here and there's something called pull request. So I can go to pull request. Now there's a guideline for this whole process about, how you should create a pull request and everything. Now I'm not, because of time, I'm not going to go through it. But if you go back to this documentation here, and I think if you go to, where did I add it? I'll add it somewhere. I don't remember where. Yeah, if you go to this pull request, so there's a whole guideline, right? How you should be doing your pull request, right? So you have to start with the issue, then you should do this and so on and so forth. So there's a whole of this guideline. You can go ahead and check it. So I'll let you guys check that out. Okay. But yeah, so here's a project setup. Now, people, if you're new for the first time, you're going to do a project setup, then you can follow this guideline here. And there's a step 4, which tells you about, how you should create a PR and merge to production once approved. So I'll let you guys go and check there. But right now, because of time, we're just going to go ahead and create a pull request. So I can come to pull request here. I can click new pull request and see here, it tells me, right, which branch do you want to push to the main branch. So here I can select my branch. Right now, as soon as I do that, I can see the files that I've changed. Basically the files that I've made changes to and so on. Now I can click on create pull request. Then here is where I can write down a short message or something, right? So here I can say, basically on my side, I'm just adding a new file, right? So adding a new feature, I can say, new feature. This needs to be really nice and short. And here I can add a new detail, created a new file, some content on it to be pushed to production, something like this. Then I can go ahead and I can click on create pull request. And then here is where I can add reviewers, right? So here I can add Ashit as a reviewer. Because he's a collaborator on this project, I can add him. Here I can assign. So assign is me because I'm the developer who's working on this. Then here I can add some labels. Labels is basically, am I resolving a bug? Am I creating a documentation, or am I adding a new feature request? Then I can do adding a new feature request, because that's what I'm working on. And this development is where you can link the issue if you create an issue. Again, go and check out the documentation, it's there. Now, once you do all of that, you see this merge pull request button. Usually this shouldn't be there if you add branch protections, but because the branch is not protected right now, you see this button and you can click on it. But yeah, if your branches were protected, you wouldn't have this until the other person approves it, basically. Right now, what Ashit can do is Ashit can go ahead and he can review this file and everything, and then all that he can do is all that he needs to do. So how do you do code review? Okay, so here you have multiple things, right? You have commit, so you can go and commit. You can check all the messages, right? So here I have a message called new file added with some content. This is the commit that I wrote earlier, right? Then I can go to file changes, and here's where it shows me the changes, right? So let's say now Ashit was working on this same stuff and he made some changes. I would see the differences between them. So that git diff command that you talked earlier, someone asked earlier, you can actually see that live on GitHub. Okay. And then what Ashit can do is this, right? He can come here, he can click on review changes. And then here's where he can do multiple things. He can leave some comments, right? he can approve, or he can ask me to make some changes. Until then, he's not going to approve, right? So let's say he comes here and he's like, hey, there's a typo in this. Then he can click on this and he can just write a message here. Like, there's a typo, fix it, etc., etc. Right? He can write here and he can leave a single comment. Right? So actually, let's demonstrate this. Ashit, do you wanna share your screen? You can demonstrate that. Okay. So he can go to file changed and make some comment or something. Yeah, see, Ashit can see the diff, right? So previously there was nothing there, and now there's a new line that's been added. Right? So you can click on that plus sign and you can leave some comment. You can say extend this, yeah, fix typo, and then add single comment. And then here in the comment, you can just say left a comment. And then here he could have, mentioned request changes or comment, but that's fine. Now I'm gonna come back to it on my side. And I can, I'm gonna share my screen. Hold on a minute. Right. Okay. So on my side, you can see my screen.
Yeah.
On my side, you can see, Ashit left a comment here, right? And then what I can do is I can go ahead and make some changes. So I'm just gonna check again what branch am I on, and then I can just make some changes. This file is created by me, modified as per Ashit. I can say as per code review. And then I can check the git status, and I can do git add file again, git commit, code review, git push, all done. Then I can go ahead here and I can refresh it and see, you can see a new commit here. I can click on it, right? Now I can see there's a new line that was added. Now if I go to file changed here, I can see the new file that was added, right? So I can come here and I can tell Ashit like, hey, I've done this. Now I don't need to write here as a reply. All I can do is resolve conversation, sorry, resolve conversation. As soon as I do that, Ashit will get a notification or something that, okay, it's been resolved. And now he can go ahead and he can approve. So Ashit, you can go and approve. So the way that he does that is basically he will go under review changes and he will just click on approve, and he can write a message, it's good to go or something like that. So you can do that and you can let me know once you're done. Right. Done. So now Ashit approved these changes and he left some message. And as soon as he does that, I can see here one approval. And this would automatically turn it into whatever you see right now. Then I can go ahead and merge pull request and then confirm merge. And then I can delete this branch. Now it's always a good idea to delete that branch and then recreate a new branch to work on. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the branch. As soon as I delete the branch, you will see a few things. One, in the main, you see file 01.txt is here. And the other thing is, you see the branch vanished. It's no longer there, right? So this is good. But this is on the remote repository, right? I need to make sure that my local repository is in sync. So how can I do that? Well, what I can do is I can git checkout. I first need to switch to the main branch. Okay, so I switched to the main branch. Now this time I don't need to pass in -b because I'm not creating a branch. I'm just switching the branch, right? So I don't need to do -b here. So now what I can do is I can do git pull origin main, right? That's the first step. So now I can see the readme. I can also see the file 01.txt that wasn't there before. Now I can safely delete the branch. So the command is git branch -t, which is basically delete. And then I can type in the name of my branch. And now say my branch is gone. So I don't see that anymore. And that's it. That's how you do the whole PR, basically. If you delete the branch, how will you know later what changes you made? Well, I don't care about the branch anymore, right? Because now if I want to know what changes that were made before, that's okay. I can see that, right? So if I go here, right? If I go to pull request, you see here one closed, I can click on there, right? I can see the PR that was closed. I can click on there, right? And here I can see the branch name, and I can also see everything that was there before, it's still there. Then I can go ahead and see what other changes that was made and so on. Right? And the reason why I deleted that branch is because, now that you're working with this feature and this feature has been merged into production, right? This branch is no longer needed. So it's always a good idea to just delete the branch. And then, even if you want to recreate with the same name, you can just recreate that with the same name. Right?
Also, if you need to look at the changes again, the past changes, you can see in the commits. If you just go to the commits, you'll see the old branch commits as well.
Right. So you can see that
not in pull request, in the main commits.
Yeah. So here, right? So you can go here and you can check as well. Right. Yeah. So for example, right, what did I do? I just merged to my branch, right? So I added these two things. Now let's say before that, I want to see how my repository looked like. You can see the repository back in time, how it looked like 20 minutes ago or so on. Right. So that's it. But yeah, don't forget that always delete the branch once you're done with your work, and just recreate a new branch. Don't keep on working with the branch. Just recreate a new branch and delete them from both places, like remote repository as well as local repository. Okay, hopefully that answered your question and hopefully that was useful. Now Ashit can do the same thing with this, with his own branch. We won't demonstrate that, but yeah, he can do the same thing with his own branch, right? Now the other thing, so someone talked about conflict. I'm thinking about conflict. How do we do that? Okay, so what I'm going to do this, basically I'm going to, so Ashit has a branch, right? I don't have that branch on my computer, right? But I can take that branch, I can pull that branch on my computer and I can make changes to that file at the same time. So how am I going to do that? So we do the same thing as before. So the first thing we can do is we can check all the branches that exist, right? So this one here shows me the branch, like my own branches and so on, right? And I think the command is all. Oh, -- all. Nope. I forgot the command. Okay, let me see. So this is why the documentation is useful, because I can go back to it anytime. Okay, so let's see.
Try L or -L.
Dash what?
L.
Oh, nope. Nope. Okay, well, let's leave that for now, but I'm going to pull Ashit's branch to my local computer. There's a command actually to see all the branches. Yeah, it's supposed to be -R, but okay, maybe, okay, I don't know. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull Ashit's branch to my local computer, to local repository, right? So let's do that. So I'm going to git checkout. What's his branch name? So I'm following this command here. So what is his branch name? His branch name is Ashit. Did I make a typo or is it correct? Nope.
Can you do git pull once?
Let me do git pull. Yeah, no, this should be letting me do that.
Yeah.
Ah, it wasn't there. Okay. So what if I try now? Okay, yeah, I can see here. So that's a shit span. So you can use -R. Okay, and then I can basically check out on Ashit's branch. And then I think, let's see if I have his changes. Yeah, I have his changes, 02.txt, right? Now, let's say I make some changes to this 02.txt. So what is it that Ashit did in here? Let me see. 02. My files, instead of my file, let's say I do my files. I just added as, okay, and I'm gonna git add file, git commit, updated content, let's say git push, origin, and then Ashit. Okay. So I think Ashit, you can share your screen. You'll see a conflict, I believe. Let's see. Yeah, it's really difficult sometimes you're creating a scenario for conflict. Let's see if this created a scenario or not. Okay.
Yeah, on remote, I can see the changes.
Yeah.
And on my local, I don't have the changes yet. So let me just do a conflicting change in this.
Yeah.
So you did my files. I can, what should I do? I do my fill.
Yeah, just make a typo, something. Just do fill. Yeah, that's okay.
Now I'll try to push it.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a conflict. Yeah, so git tells you, and also git tells you some commands, right? It tells you like git pull before pushing again, right? So let's try that.
Git pull. First, let's see. I think the file must have changed, right? So so what happened?
Did you freeze or something?
Yeah. Okay, so let's check the file. Okay, it's the same. So it just didn't let me push. So I'll just do git pull once. Origin, I should write.
Yeah.
So now I can see there's a conflict.
So I think you can open it. Yeah, there you go. So we can spend some time talking this first before we resolve the conflict. Okay. So how do you know the conflict, right? How do you know which changes to make, right? So Git tells you, right? So the conflict starts from that less than arrow and head. Head basically means the conflict from that's coming from the remote repository. Okay. And then you have those dash lines, right? Those dash lines basically means that anything above it's coming, so line 3, so above line 3, that's coming from the remote repository. Below line 3, it's coming from your local repository, right? Now Ashit can decide which one he wants to keep and which one he wants to delete. So you can go ahead and do that. I'm going to close the door actually. It's a lot of noise.
Yeah, so if I just want to keep this change, what I'll do is I'll just remove this. I'll do this. I'll save it.
Mhm.
Then I'll just add resolve conflict. So now I'm able to push it.
Yeah, there you go. So he was able to push, and I can do the same thing on my side. Now I can, on my side, all I have to do is just do git pull original shit, and then basically whatever he has, it will show up on mine, basically. That's it, simple as that.
So on the remote, you can see that this is the changes that I wanted.
Yeah.
This is the final file that I wanted. So that's what is visible here.
Yep. And yeah, that's it. So that's how you resolve conflict. So yeah, so we talked about the basic commands. I think it's a good time to wrap up. I mean, there's a lot more things, but yeah, we don't have time. So there's something called log and so on. So, but yeah, we don't have time. So actually, one last thing I can show you. I mean, if it's useful to people before we leave is basically this thing
Meanwhile,
called,
everyone can answer this poll. Is the poll visible?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so meanwhile, while you guys answer that poll, I'll just quickly show you one last thing. There's something called git log, right? So git log shows you all the commits that's been done, right? So on Ashit's repo, we see that there are 7 commits. So I can see all the commits here. So at the top, it will show you the most recent one. And as you go down, you will see basically the older ones, right? So this is git log. Now, let's say if you just want to see the commit messages, there's a lot of detail when you type git log, right? So you type git log, and then you can just type one line. So now you can see all the commit messages, right? So this is really useful. This is very handy if you just want to see, what are the commits that people have done and so on. Right? Now, the other thing we can do is basically git log. Ah, shit, this keeps coming. Wait. There's this command here. So you can format basically the way that you want to see the logs. So for example, this one here, it tells me, okay, so this one here tells me basically, what are the changes that was done by who and when, right? So I can see 40 minutes ago, I should did some changes. I can see the commit that he typed. I can see I made some changes 34 minutes ago. I can see the commits that I did, right? I can see basically, yeah, I see the commit ID, right? I can see, you can use this commit ID to go back in time. Again, we are out of time, so I won't talk about it. You can see the authors who made the changes. You can see the time, when was the changes done, and you can also see the commit messages, right? So that's what this here command allows you to do. So git log, and there's something called pretty, just to make the format nice, and they can just type format, and then you can just look for these things. And again, this is in the documentation. So if you documentation, yeah. So if you go here, and I think if you go to book, and somewhere down here with the commit history, yeah, it's here. You can see here. So yeah, there are a lot of things that you could try, which is here. Right? So that's another handy thing to have. But yeah, I think that's a wrap up for today. Hopefully it was worth it, and hopefully people learned quite a few things. So let's take a final question. So Git does not allow changes to be made in the same file by 2 people, but allows to work on the same branch. So Git allows people to work on the same branch. It also allows you to make changes to the same. So you can make changes like we saw today. You can make changes to the same part of the same file. But what Git tells you is it gives you control of what is it that you want to keep, right? Which changes do you want to keep and which changes do you want to delete. That's what Git allows you to do. So it lets you control basically, your changes basically. Right? Okay. Any other questions? So we'll stick around a couple more minutes if you have any questions, and then we'll wrap up. And yeah, the other thing I didn't talk about is the mentorship. So me and Ashit, we provide a data science mentorship. So basically, there are a lot of boot camps out there that people do. And boot camps, there's a huge gap between boot camps and when you go and work in industry, right? So to fill in that gap, basically we started offering this mentorship program. It's like an internship. You would come and work with us for a period of 2 months, and we would build the entire end-to-end data science project. That's what we are offering. And also, it's unlike boot camps where there'll be 30 people, 40 people in a batch. We don't do in batches. That's why we take limited students. We do one-on-one basis. So we take on students, we work with them on one-to-one for a period of 2 months. We build an entire end-to-end project. And I've shared the documentation page, so you guys can basically see there. If you're interested, you can go and so this is a documentation page, and basically this is the entire pipeline that we together would build, from data engineering to data science to deployment to using many different tools. So this is the entire pipeline, right? So it starts from raw data all the way to deployment, which is a dashboard or a Flask app or whatever. And following the best practices and using GitHub just like we did in collaboration. So we have a bunch of students we are working with, and we communicate over Slack and so on. But yeah, that's it. So I think that's about it on my side. And
the slides of the mentorship program I'll share in the chat. You'll also get this on your email by tomorrow. If you are interested or you need some more information on this, just fill out this form. We'll reach out to you. And so let's just take any questions on this, if there are any, anyone.
Yeah. This recording will be uploaded on our YouTube channel. So if you wanna, and again, we'll send an email with the link. So if you need a refresher, feel free to go onto our YouTube channel, subscribe, and check out the other videos and so on and so forth.
So for the refund for this session, you can just fill out this form that I just sent in the chat. We'll close this form today by tonight. So just fill this out quickly. And any questions about the session or the mentorship, you can just ask right now.
Okay, and I can see the poll that there are 75% of the people need more information about the mentorship. So so you can reach out to us. We'll be happy to walk you through whatever more information you need, and in some details. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask, unmute yourself or whatever. We'll just stick around one more minute and then we'll wrap up.
Also, any feedbacks, any suggestions, they're also welcome.
Yeah.
Any masterclass on LLMs? Not at the moment. We'll see.
Hey, what's LLMs?
Large language models,
Oh,
ChatGPT.
NLP side. Oh, yeah, I'm not the guy on the NLP side, so I don't know much about NLP stuff. I'm more on the computer vision side. So, um,
Okay, then if there are no more questions, let's wrap up.
Yeah, so no more questions. So let's wrap up. And yeah, we'll do more sessions. As of now, we haven't planned what yet. But yeah, based on the poll, we'll come up with some sessions. Also, we'll do some machine learning sessions as well. I think Ashit and Nitin last time they conducted regression. So we'll come up with some more, similar sessions, and I'll be there so as well. So okay, thank you guys for joining. Thanks for your time, and yeah, have a good night. And yeah, reach out to us
Thanks,
if you have any.
everyone.
All right, take care.
Bye.